Welcome to That RPG podcast, where every great adventure starts with a single idea.
I'm DQ, your friendly neighborhood GM.
I'm Courtney Staples, and I want off this wild ride.
And I'm Johnny Law, and I'm ready to get spooky up in this beat.
Hey, we're back. Welcome to next week. So Chicago fell. That was crazy, right? Like I
know.
I thought they would at least would last 5 days. But,
It's like, are we going to Judge Dredd? Are we going to Alien, Blade Runner? Which is our dystopic future?
I don't know.
All of the above, I think. Yeah, it's a fun mix. Yeah.
So no Star Trek is what you're telling me.
No.
We're going to get the shitty new Star Trek. That's what we're going to get instead, where people get decapitated.
What? That's not Star Trek. What?
I'm not even making that up. That's literally what happens in the new Star Trek.
If we could just take a moment of silence too for Tucker Carlson. I don't know. I didn't believe in what he thought most of the time, but he did try to stand up at the end, and I don't know. He fell out that window. That was crazy, right?
That's nuts. Yeah.
Poisoned out of a window. How's that even happen?
What are the odds?
Yeah.
What are the odds?
Jesus Christ. No, but seriously, let's talk about monsters and how let's make monsters great again.
Yeah, let's make monsters. That's going to be the name of the whole series. Make monsters great again. Is it MAGA? Make
MAGA.
No, it's
MAGA.
Make monsters.
Make a monster. Make a monster great again.
Make a manga.
Oh, the Dear GM for today is very sweet and simple. How do I make my monsters interesting to my players so they're not just a bag of hit points? So this may be one of the hardest questions to answer in RPGs. And I think a lot of the times you'll be handcuffed by your system if it doesn't let you do certain things, or it makes you do extra work to do certain things. But there are a lot of things you can do to make monsters interesting, or should I say engaging, right? We talked about last time that what do we want out of our players, and one of the things we talked about was the idea of them being engaged. So I'm going to interpret interesting to mean engaging, meaning we want them to interact with the monsters and figure out how to defeat them and learn about them. And I think, when you mentioned bag of hit points, there's some GM mentalities that we have to escape from. One of them is not to think of the monsters as bags of hit points, like the classic attrition model where we're just trying to deplete them until they die. So we do some math based on how much damage we can do once we learn how many hit points they have, or just defeat them that way. Now you've lost all engagement because they're just literally video game tunes. That's one of the mentalities you got to get out. You want also at the same time, you don't want to have an unnecessary attachment to your monsters, so they're not your toys. So I usually like to think of it like, if he dies is how you should treat your monsters, because they're not yours. You're just placing them in the environment to be interacted with by your players. And I can get into more about what it means to not treat monsters as a bag of hit points. The two other things now, so we talked about the GM, how they have to change their mentality, but there's two other things with the monsters that we want to do. And that is, one of them is we really need to get into the mind of the monster and its psychology and think of it as a truly realized entity unto itself. So questions you should ask about your monsters, no matter what type of monster they are, is like, why are they in the scene and what do they want out of the scene? I think it's, I can't remember which classic author said this, but which is failure for an English major. I attribute this to early onset Alzheimer's. But the idea is that every character wants something, even if it's a glass of water. And maybe in the notes I'll put where that quote came from. But your monster also wants something, whether it's primal instinct, if it's a wild creature, maybe it's an intelligent cryptid, so it has esoteric goals. Maybe it's looking for an artifact or protect something, or it just has a sense of awe. If it's undead, they tend to have folklorish restraints or goals that have to do with their life when they were alive. And eldritch beings, usually they have incomprehensible goals. So that's one thing. Their psychology, and part of their psychology is playing to the way that they're motivated. Their morale is a huge factor. Their relationships with the environment that they live in. And then the last thing I would say is, once you've decided these things about your monster, you want to focus mechanically on only the things that matter. So if it doesn't serve that psychology, then why is it statted up? Like if they have some equipment that you added because it makes sense for this monster to have that, but it has nothing to do with their psychology or how they behave. Why do they have the equipment? It's never going to come into play. It's a waste of your time. And then the last thing, and I've said this versions of this before, is portray your monster faithfully, which means don't hold back. If your monster would viciously attack the weakest person because, I don't know, it's bred to thin the herd, then that's what you do. And your players have to deal with that. Maybe they can learn that that's what it's going to do beforehand. But the idea is that you're not here to babysit your players. You're here to make a monster behave as it should and get into the psychology. So I'll stop there. I could talk more about what it means to not treat it like a bag of hit points, but I want to get your feedback as well.
I would say, going back to our discussion last week about Alien Earth, don't just like put everything about the monster out there. Make sure that your players can discover things as they go. And maybe those things will be very surprising or disturbing, or like Daniel said, like give it some sort of motivation that isn't immediately obvious, which I think Alien Earth is doing well with one of the particular creatures in there. And also, like, yeah, make sure that there's a reason for the monster to even be there. Like, it's not a matter of like, oh, my players are going through a swamp, so here's a swamp troll. Like, what should actually be in the swamp? Why would they be interacting with it? How does it act? Is this swamp troll like protecting its area? Does it want to eat these people? Like, what's it doing there? It's not just going to be like, I don't know, you should always think about the real ecology and reasoning for these things. Like, what do they survive on? What do they do in their day-to-day existence? What do they do when something unusual shows up? How do they react to that? Yeah, veer away from like, oh, it's an ice cave, so there's going to be like a Yeti monster in there. Like, what else could you bring to the table that's a bit less expected, maybe?
I was really hoping that you were going to say ice troll, but that's...
Ice troll works too, yeah.
You're in the city, there's an urban troll.
Yeah.
You're hacking the mainframe, internet troll. There's this little known blogger / he has a YouTube channel. I don't think he's been on it a couple months though. But this guy, you probably haven't heard of him, DQ, Justin Alexander. But
I've never heard of him. It's not like he's my role model.
You should check him out. You should write it down. You should check him out. You'd really like him. He's really similar to a lot of your thoughts. But anyway, but he talks about making a dungeon be alive. And this is kind of what I think Courtney was saying, in the sense of like, it's you have these denizens of a dungeon. It doesn't have to be a dungeon. It could be a swamp. It could be any kind of scenario or scene or whatever. But they what are they doing outside of your presence being there? And how would they react with you interrupting their daily life or their duties or their goals and ambitions or whatever? I mean, maybe that troll wants to dance. Who knows? And he's going to learn how to do the West Coast swing, the 6-count step, and you guys just come rolling in, trying to light them on fire and shit, because that's what you do with trolls. And that's not meta. People would know how to light trolls on fire if they regenerate. Just saying. Acid works too. But yeah, I think it is that mentality though of going into creating monsters. And if that's your intent too, to have the monster be something more than just something a barrier to the next part. And I feel like I didn't read the books, and I did play the game, and I did watch the first 2 seasons of the show. The first one's better, but like The Witcher did a good job of like making the monsters have a presence in the world and have their own motivations outside of whatever the Witcher's goal was and whatever. Like, I feel like that, like it adds just a beautiful element to it, that it's not just some scary thing. It's part of its own environment and takes place. Same thing with the Wampa in Empire Strikes Back. Like, he's out hunting, finds the Skywalker, shoves them up to get them all nice and frozen.
Another good show to watch for inspiration for like weird creatures and things would be Scavenger's Reign, which is an animated sci-fi show. And it's all about alien ecology, basically, and alien environments. And
I feel like that was more environmental though.
Yeah, I feel like it all kind of blends together, because in that way too, it's like everything exists in an ecosystem, and there's an order to things, and got predators, prey, and so on. So
I think that's another way of looking at it though too. It's like, because I mean, you can think about the environment and traps and bad things happening, whatever, and you think about monsters, and they can have, if they're bigger monsters, they have lair actions and stuff like that. But I think you're taking it to some kind of middle ground there, that it's like you have like denizens and creatures, and I'm sure Alien Earth talks about that, but we're not going to talk about it because I haven't watched those episodes yet.
Like, think about monster types, right? Like, and I can speak towards the types that I developed, but when you think about monster types, like the monsters, quote unquote, in Scavenger's Reign are wild. Like, so that automatically tells you a lot about how they would behave. It tells you about their psychology. Versus if I'm, let's say, in an infernal dungeon and I'm dealing with astral beings, which in other game systems might be like demons and angels and divine entities, like they likely behave on the basis of their scheming, because we know that evil demon type beings are always scheming and they want to get one over you. Or if they're angels, they have some divine mission. So the monster type alone tells you about a lot about what it's going to do. And that in turn ties it to a particular location. Like, so if I'm in Scavenger's Reign, the environment is a monster to me from my perspective, because it's not posed to me intentionally, but it treats me as a resource. So, which in turn makes me a post. We could even think about, without spoiling anything, in Alien Earth, their various monsters have their own motivations because of their environmental origins. Right. So, and I won't name them, but we can say like one of them clearly is intelligent and has motivations that are human-like, and that alone makes it dangerous. One of them is limited by the sort of food it can eat, and so the kind of danger it poses is based on that knowledge. So as players, not knowing that could be a problem for you. One of them eats in a very particular way that's grotesque, but it's vulnerable when it eats that way once it's sated, right? So there are things.
It eats with its ass. It eats with its ass. Okay, just sits and like.
It's vulnerable once it's eaten. And then the classic, the alien, the xenomorph, what we call the xenomorph, which xenomorph really apparently is a designation for any alien monster, any alien animal. It's akin, it's likened to like an ant colony or to a beehive, in that it has this voracious need to replicate. And it will defend itself, and it's extremely hostile and aggressive. And various lore of Alien talks about how they've been engineered to be more and more like that, to the point that they're extremely efficient. And so, when we think about Alien as a monster, one of the ways to fight it is to know about it. And so when we summarize kind of our advice here, I think it's like saying what makes a monster engaging isn't the cool powers it has or its vulnerabilities or the harm it can cause. It's how it can engage with the players. What's engaging about it is how it engages, which sounds circular, but really it's how you interface with the game, as a player, is how you interface with the monster too.
Mm-hmm. Or even going back to Alien Earth and the discussion about like billionaires and trillionaires essentially being dragons. You could look to that sort of mentality too for inspiration, where like if you had unlimited resources but still had the human need for or desire for like power and such, like what would that look like? How would you act? And you would probably stop seeing other people as people and see them more as just things to use.
We even see the two trillionaires. I mean, again, not very spoilery, but we see the first trillionaire, very beginning, very megalomaniacal genius. What do you call it? Not empathetic, sociopath, psychopathic, I would say, right? There's another one that we encounter, we know less about, who does have a certain honor code. And so they're different kind of monsters, or the way they might be different dragons. Like I could encounter in classic D&D a red dragon who's megalomaniacal and very much like Boy Cavalier. But then I might encounter, I'm trying to think of another evil dragon, maybe like
black dragons are very territorial.
Black dragon, they're territorial and scheming, or blue dragons, very arrogant. So there's different qualities you can give them, and by knowing that psychology of them, the players can fight them in ways. If they can't beat the dragon, let's say they're level 1, there's no way they're going to beat the red dragon, but they might be able to play to its avariciousness or to its self-importance, because from its perspective, they're peons, they're nothing. So why should it even be worried about them? They might want to play with them, and so that might be something you can exploit.
There is a comment in the first episode too about humans being food elements until a certain period of time. They're not, and then I guess the irony is that they become food elements again. So that's the whole thing. Spoilers. By the way, if you haven't seen Alien Earth, you should go out and watch it. It's on Hulu, so you can pirate it if you want, because we're not supporting Hulu right now. Sorry, Hulu. Great job. You've been Good Letterkenny, so many good shows. Shorzy, oh,
Shorzy,
God.
yeah.
We'll get back to you. But you're gonna have to be dragged through the coals first because your boss has capitulated. Whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, so all that's fine. It's on FX, which I don't. Is that even a thing? I don't. Yeah, or you could go back and watch our previous episode and see a little bit what we thought about the show.
Courtney, you had asked what in the Alien episode that we're talking about, or not the Alien episode, in our first episode that mentions Alien,
just the Alien episode.
You asked like, how do we replicate that sense of tension and the way the monster is presented that makes players like what would put players on edge? And there's mechanical ways to do that. The obvious appeals to the five senses. So the more you can immerse them, because it's about immersion. If you can immerse them, you can make them afraid. So you want to appeal to the five senses, what they hear, what they feel. Like, so think of the alien, the xenomorph. What they hear is like clacking and tapping as it
chittering
in the background, the chittering. Exactly. Or you hear the tapping of it, the quiet tapping, because it's a stealth predator, right? What we feel is the slime on our face or the steam. What we see is glimpses in the dark of its sleekness, or when it presents its mouth, the teeth, which are very human, are part of what makes it unsettling. And the mouth inside of a mouth is very eldritch. And also, like, it appeals to our, it destabilizes us. That's what horror does. So those, you want to appeal to the senses. Then also, you want to zero in on aspects of the monster. Like, you don't ever want to just drop a dragon in front of someone. You can't. It'll be unexpected. You want to show parts of it. So you want to show the wings in the clouds, or you see the light shining down from the sun. You see its shape, and it's huge and blots the sun out. You want to, when it gets near them, you want to see its enormous eye as the size of you. Those are kind of very visceral, piecemeal parts of the monster that don't give you it gives you a sense of its either enormity or terror in pieces. And then I think the third one, which is the most effective, is the evidence it leaves behind. So oftentimes in horror, being presented having the thing presented to you isn't the horror; it's the anticipation of it. So in Alien, it's the acidic holes it leaves from its blood or whatever. Like, what the hell could do that? That goes through the whole many floors. That's threatening. It's the footprints that the dinosaurs leave in Jurassic Park with the water vibrating. It's in a D&D, you might have a monster that has left evidence of its body around. Maybe it sheds or molts and you find the casings of it. So it doesn't give you a full depiction of what it is, but clearly it's big, right? So leaving evidence behind is one way to build up towards its actual reveal. And that reveal isn't the payoff. It's now I have all this knowledge as to what I'm fighting, and I'm immersed, and now I have to fight it. So it's the execution.
In D&D, it's a very clean rectangular hallway with some kind of glooping going on down. Gotta draw this cube.
That one's presented by that one is revealed through its negative presence.
Yeah, it's more like a M. Night Shyamalan style. What a twist,
Well, and it leaves evidence, right? Like you'll see things suspended in it.
What are your thoughts as far as like BBGs are concerned, or mine or bosses, and the same thing? Them showing up and giving you a taste at a lower level.
I think that's great because it hints at the idea that this is like an important narrative thing. And, if you do it carefully enough, because again, if you present something powerful to the players, they could potentially kill it somehow or derail you entirely.
You have to pay the dice too. Like
you have to be willing to wager that, but I think that gives, for BBEGs, the reason why you do it is to like create a narrative trail. So like you're going to bring it back and reveal some other face of it. But usually BBEGs are more human. So if you're going to have a BBEG monster, like if we're doing the first Alien movie, the alien itself is the BBEG, but it's also the main monster and antagonist. So you don't want to just give it all away right off the bat. So you do have little encounters to build up its power in their minds.
Yeah. And that is how the original Alien movie worked. You get the egg, the face hugger, then the chest burster, and you see like this little thing, but you don't actually see like the alien itself fully grown until pretty much near the end, I feel like.
It's leaving that trail of evidence that is going to be freaky for everyone. Like, and I think of like even Lovecraftian sort of things. He often will just say it's indescribable, but he'll build up towards that moment by showing you the effects of the monster, its effect on people's sanity over time. And so the horror isn't in seeing the actual indescribable thing, which eventually happens. It's the descent into madness as a result of the evidence it leaves behind.
Another thing too, to like make your players more engaged with it, is encourage creative thinking when it comes to how they defeat or deal with these things. Going back to the original question of them just being piles of hit points or whatever, it doesn't have to be that way. Like, sure, they'll have a stat block, and sure, if X amount of damage is dealt, then they will likely die or something will happen. But you can also have other ways to interact with them. For example, if you, I don't know, like have a vampire in your game and you expect or sort of think like, oh, they're going to have this final confrontation, it's going to be a fight, and then they finally have to like stake it in the heart and that's going to be it. But like, what if your players decide to like jury rig up some weird mirror contraption to get sunlight down into this vampire's crypt? Like, that could certainly be possible.
Conversely, though, if talking about people are not engaging with the enemy, like what can you do with that? I mean, I have the simplest answer, and that is to allow them to determine aspects of the beast or the creature or the monster or whatever. Because then, it's that whole thing, like, if you give them a little breadcrumb of like, hey, you get to build a part of it, yep, they're sold. Immediately they'll be sold, because now it's not your monster, it's their monster.
To follow on what you're saying, one way to do it is to make it personal. So like, if they're not engaging with the monster, they'll engage when they find out that the monster killed someone important to them, or has something they want, or is preventing them from getting it. Now it's personal. Now they have to care because it's central to their character. So you find a way to make it personal is one way to do that. I mean, you could, like you're saying, you could invite them to construct some part of it. But if you want to keep the distance between their knowledge and the truth, you can leave evidence behind that connects their story hooks to it. And now that's the key investment, is their story hooks are always the thing that they're going to eat up, because they are the ones who created the story hooks.
They put it, it's there. I mean, you could just basically tell them too that monster thinks that IUDs and birth control are forms of abortion, and like they're up in arms immediately. As well they should be, because what kind of idiot thinks that? Jesus Christ! Have you seen the world? Have you looked how many people there are? You dumb piece of.
Turn wombs into monstrous things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, that was the whole premise of Alien. What if a vagina and a womb was nightmarish, which is like an age-old thing. I don't. For the record, I don't think female body parts are monstrous.
Monstrous, yeah, no.
By any measure.
That's good. I'm glad you clarified that. Yeah.
Some can be. I didn't just. It's more of a personal care thing, I think.
Is the alien just like a bunch of penises when you think about it?
It's Geiger.
Well, it's kind of like reverse. So the face hugger is definitely like very vaginal in its appearance, but it does cram a dick down your throat, basically. And then the little guy is definitely very phallic. Yeah.
They're so weird. Like they come out and they're like, ah, and they run away.
Yeah.
Ah! Even though they can murder you.
Yeah.
But they're little babies. They got to grow up first.
They're made of like steel or something, full of acid. They skitter. It's so weird. You got to see it later.
Oh, I will. I'm on board now. I'll eventually watch. I can't. Oh, completely unrelated. Autumn and I start watching From.
Where are you right now?
Only like the 4th or 5th episode. We just saw the not Courtney. I know you haven't seen it. So we saw the box come into play.
I mean, that's a good series to mention the monsters, right? Because they're very important. You've encountered them by now, right?
I have, but I don't know enough about them, so I would rather not get too into them, because I know you have, and Courtney hasn't seen anything.
Well, I won't say any spoilers, but the monsters in that show, just as a premise, as you notice in the first moments,
it comes very early in.
They're like virtually unstoppable monsters, at least how they're presented, and they look like people generally. And we learned in the very beginning, first episode, that there's ways to keep them out. But generally, if you go one counter, that's the idea.
They're very stoppable unless you the stopping procedures, and then
like if you don't have the magic stuff to protect yourself,
or the common sense stuff.
Yes, it's kind of like the xenomorph. Like if you're face to face with the xenomorph and you're not Ripley, you're dead. You're just rips you apart. That's essentially the same thing. So
unless you have babies in you, like Ripley in the Resurrection.
If we think about like our our monster checklist, similar to how we had our non-Epstein checklist in the previous episode about scenes, when we think about the monster checklist, like how are they checking those things off? Like we don't know. I think the thing that's missing in From is we don't understand their psychology necessarily. We get hints of it later on, but I think that's a flaw in their design, that we don't truly understand their psychology. There's one way to possibly skirt that and saying part of the way that that show works is the fear comes from not understanding their psychology, but it becomes hard to engage with them if we were players in that world.
It's the same problem with Lost. Like you can hint, and you can have it, and it's mysterious, it's cool, but at some point you got to spill the beans. You got to be able to pull away the GM screen and be like, these are my notes. Like this, I actually had a plan.
Right. Right. So that's the question mark. But there's a case where if I was constructing the monster, I'd go through, I'm like, well, if they're not a bag of hit points, I can't kill them. So they're already not a bag of hit points. Like already depicted in aspects, sort of. Like we see different versions of them as people, which hints at maybe the lore of the world because they have a certain aesthetic that puts them in a place in time. Like there's evidence of them left behind, bodies that are mutilated, those kind of things. So you can start building with the same checklist to get there.
So I'm just thinking of what would be on an Epstein checklist, speaking of monsters.
Another thing I would like to mention before it's not lost, I think it's probably the other most important thing about monsters, is the choice of monster that you place in a scene or in your adventure. You have to ask yourself, what narrative purpose do they serve? So like let's go back to your swamp example. If I just arbitrarily looked at the monster manual and said, oh, what could be in a swamp? Let me grab this troll, or this, what did you say, a troll, right? I don't remember what you said. Swamp troll, right? And I'd throw them in there. I'm like, fine, swamp troll, makes sense. It doesn't make sense because what is your campaign about? Is your campaign about pirates? Is it about really cool princesses who have magic powers? Is it about, I don't know, Clockwork who have escaped from robot prison? Like, so the choice of monsters should serve the narrative in some way. Like you can certainly run, if you're going to run like a truly OSR kind of game where it's pure simulation, then sure, anything that could live in a swamp would serve your purposes. But at least what OSR Plus is about the players through their characters fulfilling the goals of their characters' narratives. So if I'm going to play the apprentice to the wizard who was killed, and my goal is to avenge my master's death and become the wizard myself, that's a narrative structure I put in place, and the campaign incorporates that. So now if I want to reach back to that theme for that player, I might want to choose a monster that dovetails narratively with that goal. So what could that be? I don't know. Maybe when I go to the ancient temple where my master was slain, I encounter the anti-magic ghouls who have devoured the souls of my master's former students. Now it's personal, and the ghouls serve a narrative purpose, and it makes sense that they're there. Maybe like the beings who serve the people who took care of this temple ran out of food, became cannibalistic, and the evil of their actions turned them into these things. You've got a whole narrative now. They serve a purpose. They make sense. There's a psychology. And you're extending the theme of your game. And if you do that, people are going to be more invested, and the immersion is going to be stronger because not only does it make sense logically, but it makes sense thematically. And I think that's a big thing we lose sight of when we're designing adventures.
Encounters and specifically too. Like, I mean, I would say there's an argument to have a quick encounter or something with a random kind of fauna or denizen of the area, like if you're in a swamp troll. Just especially like if you have players that are itching for combat, and like you don't want to make it a big deal as part of the story, but you just want to have it's just a challenge to get through. Like I could argue for that, but I think the default is that people do that, and it's like no, you could add so much more to your story by making something that actually reflects the rest of what's happening.
Yeah. I mean, and even like if I was doing, to play with your example, like let's say I'm doing jungle adventures, Indiana Jones types, and we're going to fight all kinds of weird stuff as we're getting to the ancient temples, steal the artifacts, and Nazis. I probably want to throw some of those encounters in there, but then it ends up working. You can still think about it narratively. Like if I go through the jungle and I encounter a bunch of vicious apes, because there's always vicious apes that eat people in the jungle, I might fight them and deal with them. They're an encounter. But maybe the vicious apes have on them these strange medallions, golden medallions that they couldn't have created themselves because they're dumb apes. So then you that raises narrative questions. Now you look at these medallions and you realize, oh, it belongs to a cult of worshipers in this area, religious tribal people. And then we study these, we go to their temples, we divert. We're not going to go to the artifacts. This is interesting to us. We go there and we learn that these worshipers worship a giant ape who's King Kong. Now you've got some interesting narrative questions, because what is if King Kong's a giant ape, like what else is in this jungle? And King Kong sits on a great golden throne, and you're like, man, if we could like ferry this throne back to our boat. You've added all these complications from a simple encounter, because maybe you wanted to get them to fight. Like you're saying, you want to keep them engaged with some fun stuff, but you sprinkle a little bit of something that adds to the campaign narrative to make it add up, basically.
Yeah, so that's some great tips on how to brighten up your monsters. Steve, I bought a Snickers today. I bought a Snickers. It was $2.39.
Wow.
What the is that?
It used to be like 70 cents.
I just need to break at 20. It was like, I like a Snickers.
What the fuck?
Satisfied.
You're like $15, please.
It was a fucking small ass. It wasn't like, fun size.
That's corporatocracy at work.
Well, no, the economy is doing great, though. Didn't you guys hear? Everything's fine. Everything's great in America.
Charlie Brown has saved our souls.
Praise be.
Praise be unto him.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for listening to That RPG Podcast, where every great adventure starts with a single idea. Join us next week for more from our series, Make Monsters Great Again, where we talk about how to design memorable monsters for your campaigns, the magic of lit RPGs with our resident magic engineer, C.R. Rowanson, and plunge into the depths of cosmic horror for an adventure hook inspired by Dan Simmons' Lost Expedition novel, The Terror. See you next time.